as we open this program with a prayer from Dr. Obani Kayode.
Shall we pray? Father, in the name of Jesus, we thank you for this awesome privilege to gather before you to learn something. We appreciate you concerning the vision and mission of Landmark University. It is you that really established it. Father, Lord, we commit this program to your hand. As we continue with this program from the opening prayer to the closing remarks, we ask that your grace will be available for us in the name of Jesus. We ask for wisdom for speakers and every deliberation that we hear today. Father, we ask that your glory will be seen all over the world in the name of Jesus. And by this program, you move Landmark University forward, you move faculty, staff, and students forward. Thank you, Father. Blessed be thy name. And the vision of Landmark will be established. In Jesus' mighty name, we are praying. Praise the Lord.
We shall be taking the Landmark University anthem. Let us still be standing as we take the Landmark University anthem. Studio, please. Let's have our seat. The Acting Vice Chancellor, Ma, I'll be taking the next item on the agenda, which is the protocol for this event. The Acting Vice Chancellor, Professor Charity Aremu, the Registrar, Landmark University, Ms. Fola Adefunke Oyinloye, the Head, Department of Agriculture, Rural Development, Blue Economy and Sustainable Environment, African Union Commission, Dr. Janet Edeme, and other members of the AUC present, Dean, School of Postgraduate Studies, Deans of Colleges, Dean Student Affairs, all academic and non-academic directors, heads of academic departments, the professorate, the chaplain, members of faculty and staff, and our kings and queens, ladies and gentlemen. Let's put our hands together for ourselves this morning. And on behalf of the management of Landmark University, I want to specially welcome everyone to this program. It's an epoch-making event, and of course, it shall move Landmark University forward. Right about now, we shall be going to the next on the agenda, which is the prologue of this webinar. And this shall be taken by no other person than the director, Landmark University Center for Research, Innovations, and Discoveries, Dr. A.A. Adediran. Let's put our hands together for him as he comes to the microphone.
Thank you, the HEMI, the VCMA, the registrar. Please permit me to adopt earlier established protocol. We are thankful to God for the platform accorded us by our own proprietary base to flag the series of webinars under Landmark University Center for Research, Innovations, and Discoveries. The 17th Lucrid Webinar is themed Agribusiness Education as a Driver of Economic Growth in Africa. There are some aspirations in the African Union Agenda 2063, and the aspiration 6 actually outline the place of youth in the Africa we want. So I'm sure that Dr. Edeme's team, the head, Department of Agriculture, Rural Development, Blue Economy, and Sustainable Environment in the African Union Commission, I'm sure the team, they are going to do justice to this topic this very morning. It's on this note, I want to say that we should relax because we're going to have the best moment in this webinar. Thank you and happy listening.
Thank you, sir. This morning, I have the singular honor to welcome to the microphone the Registrar Landmark University, Ms. Oyinloye, for our remarks.
Thank you so much, the ME. The Acting Vice Chancellor, ma'am, kindly permit me to stand on the already well-situated protocol for Landmark University, as I also respectfully and gladly acknowledge everyone that is here on this webinar from the African Union platform. It's my joy, privilege, and honor to, on behalf of the entire Landmark University community, ably led by our own very dear cerebral Acting Vice Chancellor, Professor Charity Omu-Aran, welcome everyone to the 17th Lucrid Webinar with the theme, African Agribusiness Youth Strategy, under the collaboration of Landmark University and the African Union. Landmark University is a private Christian mission-owned university that is poised to become a leading world-class university by driving agriculture. Our vision, clearly elucidated, is to be a leading world-class university by spearheading an agrarian revolution on the African continent through the exploration of hidden treasures in the Mother Earth, thereby restoring the dignity of the Black race. On the other hand is the African Union, which is a conglomerate of 55 African nations, and with the vision of achieving an integrated, prosperous, and peaceful Africa driven by its own citizens and representing a dynamic force in the global arena. Two entities with a vision drive to find and to occupy their places in the global space through impact, one would say. This is, however, not all, as both entities have several other common grounds. As a fully boarding private university, the student population at Landmark primarily consists of young people within the age bracket of 15 and 25. On the other hand is the African Union, with one of its quests being to push agriculture to young people with its focus on youth empowerment through agribusiness. And so we can say, Africa, agriculture, young people, focus, on the global space. These are common grounds, and they're indeed worthy grounds for collaborations. It is worth mentioning that the world has long moved away from unhealthy, unproductive rivalry by two or more entities driving similar goals to healthy and productive collaborations by such towards attaining mutually beneficial and robust outputs. Farrell said, and I quote, "Working with others is in my mind the future of business. You have a larger audience, more ideas, shared risk, shared workload, and you'll be getting a portion of something greater than you would have doing it alone." It is therefore not a surprise that we are holding this webinar today as both entities talking about the African Union and Landmark University look at furthering their visions and missions through this collaborative effort. We're excited that our student representatives are also here today, as it gives us the assurance that gleaning from the AU experience, a new order of passion will be stirred in their hearts for agriculture. For those who can see it, the new gold and diamond mines are agricultural spaces in their diverse varieties: the fields, the rivers, the big oceans, the poultry, and of course, their animal farms, etc. And if we must harvest the precious stones, then we must till the Mother Earth, explore and fish the rivers and the oceans, raise the animals and the birds, and so on. A challenge to every one of us, I say. This morning permits me to close with this quote by M.S. Swaminathan, and it says, "If agriculture goes wrong, nothing else will have a chance to go right." Deep and thought-provoking words, you will agree with me. It is on this note that I once again welcome you to this webinar, which promises to be very resourceful and inspiring. And I request that we open our hearts to glean information, process them into knowledge, and thereafter turn the knowledge acquired into tangible products for the world to see and to benefit from. You are all welcome. This morning, I consider it yet again a honor to bring to the podium the woman that God has placed at the helms of affairs in Landmark University for this season. And that's no other person than Professor Charity Omu-Aran. Shall we please rise and put our hands together as we bring to the podium the acting Vice Chancellor of Landmark University.
Thank you, Mark. Praise the Lord. Please may we be seated, standing on the rolled out protocols for this special webinar this morning. Permit me to appreciate the registrar who has summarily presented why we are here today. And I'm sure the African Union team listening to us, we also know and appreciate the Landmark University, all-rounded, are the faculty, are the staff, are the kings, and are the queens. Can we put our hands together? We are all-rounded. And engaging African Union this season is most apt. And I know they will appreciate that they are taking the right direction in collaborating with Landmark University. And so on this note, I bring us my remarks, very brief, just 4 or 5 slides here. Why are we going in this route? Agribusiness education is the driver if you want to grow Nigerian economy, if you want to grow African economy, agribusiness is the way forward. No wonder sometimes ago when we started agribusiness in Landmark, agripreneurship in Landmark University, just less than a year that we started it, someone called me from Lagos and said, please, how would you join and be part of it? I said, where are you located? He said, Lagos. I said, well, that time the name, all of this hybrid training had not come up. Maybe we would have been engaging the Zoom link, to ensure that we facilitate for that person. Agribusiness is the way forward. Noting where we are as Nigerians, noting where we are as Africans. The youth today, as we speak, they occupy not less than 1.1 of the total population in Africa, 1.1 billion. And now coming home, 64 million individuals are the youth, including most of us sitting here, except for very few. Except for very few. When you look at the age range, is between 17 and 35 that make up this population of the youth. So what are we saying? The hope of Nigeria, the economy of Nigeria lies in the hands of the youth. And so what is the way forward? Empowerment. Agribusiness empowerment is the way forward in ensuring that the Nigerian economy, African economy does not suffer shipwreck. I tell you, we're on the way to shipwreck. Africa, Nigeria in perspectives is on the way to shipwreck. How do we deliver? How do we rescue? How do we intercept as an institution? That's the reason why we are here. No wonder. And Jimmy Lusk said, any institution, or let me put it in perspectives, any country that knows what to produce, that knows what to eat, that knows how to grow the industry is the food police of that country. We want to be the food police of our nation. Landmark University should be the food police of our nation and of Africa. And so on this note, we want to say driving agribusiness is one of the strong directions that we must engage. Noting that we have our mission, one that says raising generation of reformers. And so if we must raise generation of reformers, the way to go is to empower them. Because there are three key areas in agribusiness. Identify the needs of the people, develop the skill, develop the manpower, develop the technology. That's all. You are driving agribusiness. And when you talk of people, you talk of food. And so that is why we believe that engaging African Union as an agrarian university will help us a great deal. And so on this note, we are glad that we are having some persons from the African Union to be part of us this morning. I am glad that we have Mr. Kennedy Ayerson, who is, of course, the Policy Officer, Rural Development Division, and the Department of Agriculture, Rural Development, Blue Economy, and Sustainable Development of African Union. He's right here with us online, and we'll get to hear from them. Again, we have the director, who, of course, permit me to say that this director is passionate about helping Nigeria. She told me one day, she said, they brought up a proposal from the African Union and considered some key federal universities in Nigeria. And where are these federal universities located? Southern and Eastern. They forwarded it as a Nigerian project. Sir and Ma, it was refused. Why? They said until they identify universities up north before the federal government will support it. They have made several efforts to grow our institutions in the area of agriculture. And this Dr. Edeme has been in the forefront because she schooled in Nigeria. I tell you, she's a Nigerian. She made several efforts and they kept thwarting. And when they push it to the north, some money committed. At the end of the day, after 1 year, after 2 years, you begin to hear stories. And as a testimony, Sazama, I was in Nasarawa State some 2 months ago as approved by the registrar and the team then. You know what happened? When we got to that university, they said, at the end of this program, even if you don't come with your vehicles, we will get you vehicles that will take you and the yam tubers we have for you back to your various destinations, because they are into a World Bank project on raising area yam. I was so delighted. I said, God, thank you for bringing me here. The first day, I said, let's go to see where they have this farm. The second, they said, no, during the last day. They made so noise about it. The television, the news, the agency, everyone came during that opening. And they were saying all of these things. We were just waiting to go to where they have those farms. At the end of the day, sir, there was nowhere. Their Dean of Agriculture there is a Yoruba man. I pray he attends a conference. Their Dean of Agriculture is a Yoruba man. I said, I had to pull him back. The last day when we were leaving, take me to where those things were said now. He said, my sister, leave that thing. That was what she told me. That's to tell you the country we are in. That's to tell you, Sazama, the country we are in. And so when Dr. Edeme brought this up some few months ago to say they have made several efforts identifying universities to work with, and they kept meeting bottlenecks, I said, no wonder. The monies will be released. And at the end of the day, what happens to these monies? Nobody will say it. So please, this is a golden, very rare, privileged opportunities that we have as an institution to start this relationship with African Union with the webinar. And we believe at the end of the webinar, so many things will be birthed. Agribusiness must start with hands-on. And the hands-on for students that we have here is having an incubation center. And so we want to believe that at the end of this day, today, greater things will be birthed through this meeting with African Union. And so on this note, even though I have so many other things on this, I think I have said it all. May I say that Africa is a nation, is a continent. Any country, Africa, my Africa, Africa, our agricultural nation. Nigeria, Africa is said to be most engaged in agriculture. And so we want to start that engagement with African Union. And so welcome this morning with me, the African Union team, as they join us, as they join Landmark University in driving agribusiness in the name of the Lord Jesus the Christ. And so on this note, we want to declare this special webinar open as we receive the African Union team in the name of God the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Thank you, and get on flight this morning as we bring up this special team from the African Union. God bless you.
Good morning, good afternoon.
Again,
can you all
let
hear
us
me?
put hands together for the acting vice chancellor this morning. I believe that the purpose of our gathering here has been situated. We are going to be having the opening remarks from His Excellency Ambassador Josepha Sako, the AUC Commissioner, Department of Agriculture, Rural Development, Blue Economy, and Sustainable Environment. And this shall be, I'll be handing the program to Dr. Janet Edeme to make this presentation. Let's put our hands together for her.
Thank you very much, Masters of Ceremony. Good afternoon from Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. And thank you very much, Acting Vice Chancellor, for those warm remarks. So the acting Vice Chancellor, Landmark University, the Registrar, Landmark University, the Deans of various colleges of the university, students of Landmark University, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols duly observed. Allow me, on behalf of the Commissioner of the Department of Agriculture, Rural Development, Blue Economy, and Sustainable Environment, Her Excellency Ambassador Josepha Sako, to welcome you all to this webinar on the role of higher education in operationalizing the African Union Agribusiness Youth Strategy under the theme Agribusiness Education as a Driver of Economic Growth in Africa, co-organized with the Landmark University. I'm going to read to you the speech of the Commissioner, who expressed delight and willingness to be present during this webinar, but due to unforeseen and pressing assignments that required her physical presence, she was not able to attend, and she sends her apologies for not attending, but commits to attend future events of this kind. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the African continent has the largest concentration of young people in the world, with an estimated 420 million youth aged between 15 to 35 years, and its share of rural youth is projected to rise to 37% by the year 2050. Young people as producers and traders of food, as workers, innovators, and entrepreneurs, and as policy actors are already playing an important role in agri-food systems. Given the appropriate support and enabling environment, it is possible for them to take advantage of new opportunities, develop innovative solutions, and contribute to building sustainable and resilient agri-food systems. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, our youth face a range of age-specific vulnerabilities and difficulties, with additional challenges for those living in rural and underdeveloped areas. For example, low opportunities in quality education and vocational training, lack of access to information, decent jobs, land, finance, and markets, exposure to hazardous work, and insufficient participation in policy dialogues and other decision-making processes. Our youths are also confronted with broader challenges in rural areas, such as the lack of or limited access to basic infrastructures and services, lack of or limited internet connectivity, and environmental degradation. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, young women, especially those living in rural and conflict-prone areas, face additional barriers related to sociocultural norms, additional responsibilities within households, limited freedom and mobility, early marriage, and pregnancy. These barriers limit women and girls' ability to seize economic and social opportunities. Gender inequalities have also been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. For example, in terms of safety, additional burden of domestic work, access to education and health services, and access to technology. Crises have disproportionate effects on young people, especially our young women, but they also create spaces for innovation. Crises such as conflicts, natural disasters, and pandemics are disrupting education, destroying jobs and sources of income, leading to migration and displacement, social unrest, and exacerbating inequalities. But nevertheless, the COVID-19 pandemic has also shown how young agri-entrepreneurs have adapted, moving to online marketing and sales, creating delivery services for transportation of their products, and adding value to primary products. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the UN Sustainable Development Goals of Agenda 2030 commits to leaving no one behind, prioritizing inclusion as a fundamental feature, ensuring sustainable development. Goal 8, for the promotion of full and productive employment and decent work for all, target 8.5 by 2030, and achieve full and productive employment and decent work for all women and men, including for young people and persons with disabilities, and equal pay for work of equal value. And goal 4, for quality education of all, target 4.4 by 2030, substantially increase the number of youth and adults who have relevant skills, including technical and vocational skills for employment, decent jobs, and entrepreneurship. In line with the SDGs, the following initiative of the African Union Agenda 2063, the 5-year priority program on employment, poverty eradication, and inclusive development, priority area 2, looking at youth and women employment, and the African Agribusiness Youth Strategy are encouraging investment programs in agri-food systems to be more youth sensitive. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, in 2014, the African Union Heads of State and Government committed to a set of tangible agricultural goals to be attained by 2025, which is just around the corner, including creating job opportunities for at least 30% of our youth in agricultural value chains, and to support and facilitate preferential entry and participation for women and youth in gainful and attractive agribusiness opportunities. Over the last decade, African governments and our regional economic organizations have increasingly recognized the need to reshape higher agricultural and agribusiness education to meet the changing needs of the agri-food sector. There is a strong appetite for change, but a need for a better understanding of the challenges that universities face in transforming into institutions that can be more dynamic and responsive, especially to the needs of the private sector. This webinar comes at a time when the African Union, along with other development partners, are considering possible approaches to address these challenges. A lot of dialogues have taken place in Africa in recent years, involving our African governments, regional agro-innovation and education networks, under the umbrella of the African Union Comprehensive Africa Agriculture Development Program. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, over time, universities have exerted a long-run impact on public ministries through the training of BSc, MSc, and PhD level graduates who are hired by the ministries. In planning curricula, I request that universities, including Landmark University and indeed other African universities, undertake the following 4 points. 1, continue to seek inputs from government ministries as well as the African Union regarding their knowledge and their skill needs. Secondly, consider promoting the engagement of faculty in national agricultural plans and strategies of the Ministries of Agriculture. Over the past decade, many African Union governments have produced national agricultural action plans, setting out government priorities for agricultural transformation. In most cases, formal university engagement in these government initiatives have been limited, although in some cases, university faculty have been recruited on a short time as consultants to support the development of these agricultural action plans. Activities that result in recognition of universities' contribution to national agricultural plans may also result in greater funding for universities, both by government and by foundations, and also by bilateral donors. Thirdly, African universities would also benefit from collaboration with public data collection institutions. Strong alliances between African universities, local policy research institutes, data collection units, and ministries of agriculture can help create a more central role for the agricultural universities in national agricultural research. And fourthly, university leadership needs to provide incentives for department heads and individual faculty to collaborate with national statistical offices and agricultural policy institutes in the preparation and implementation of externally funded grant proposals to strengthen the database on which evidence-based agricultural transformation policies depend. Ladies and gentlemen, there is a sustainable agricultural training and vocational program under the African Union Comprehensive Africa Agriculture Development Program, supported by the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, which may also provide a model for consideration and potential expansion. The program has 4 modules. We focus on policy analysis and guidance, climate change adaptation in agriculture, agricultural training, vocational and educational training, and then women, in which Landmark University needs to explore these options. In conclusion, on behalf of my commissioner, the extent to which Africa can compete in a rapidly evolving and increasingly sophisticated global agri-food sector and realize the full potential of the sector to contribute to job creation and reduce climate change impacts will be greatly influenced by its success in delivering appropriate knowledge and skills to the future agri-food and agribusiness labor force. So on behalf of Her Excellency, Ambassador Joseph Asako, I thank you all for your kind attention, and I wish us all a very successful webinar. Thank you very much, and over to you, Master of Ceremony.
Thank you very much, Dr. Janet Edeme, for that delivery. And we want to appreciate Our Excellency, Ambassador Josepha Sako, for sending us that remarks. Again, let us put our hands together for her. We shall be going into the presentation, and the title of that presentation is AU Agribusiness Strategy, the role of higher education in operationalizing the African Agribusiness Youth Strategy within the context of Agenda 2063. And the presenter is Mr. Kennedy Ayasin, the Policy Officer, Rural Development Division, Department of Agriculture and Rural Development, Blue Economy and Sustainable Environment, African Union Commission. If we are set to receive him, let us put our hands together as we have him.
Thank you so much, the Master of Ceremony. Let me recognize the order of protocol, the Vice Chancellor, Landmark University, the Head Department, Department of Agriculture, Rural Development, Blue Economy and Sustainable Environment of the African Union Commission, the Deans of Schools and Faculties, Deans of Colleges, the Head Academic, the Chaplain of Landmark University students, ladies and gentlemen. Before I could proceed, as far as this topic is concerned that I'm supposed to present, allow me on the onset, bring you up to speed on the Agenda 2063, and I will be putting off my video and trying to project it. Hopefully we can be able to see my screen. Just a minute, let me project my screen and we can proceed. Is it visible to us all?
Yes, Kennedy, it is.
Okay, thank you. To introduce my presentation, I will start by the background of the Agenda 2063 and then look at the key features of Agenda 2063 and look at the general overview of Agenda 2063, how it is gonna happen, and then look at concluding remarks, then link this to the African Agribusiness Youth Strategy, which has just been adopted last year in December 2021 by our ministers responsible for agriculture, water, and environment during the ministerial conference. Ladies and gentlemen, to introduce, the Agenda 2063 is a shared framework for inclusive growth and sustainable development for Africa that is supposed to be realized in the next 50 years. And we have already taken 10 years. It is a continuation of the Pan-African drive that is meant for centuries and to have a unity of the African continent, which is self-determination, freedom, progress, and collective prosperity. And as such, it is pursued under the Pan-African Renaissance. It builds on and seeks to accelerate the implementation of past and existing continental initiatives for growth and sustainable development. It was agreed upon by the African leaders in 2013 through the 50th anniversary when we declared the Organization of the African Unity. In that declaration, the heads of states and government of the continent acknowledged past successes and then challenges. Then they dedicated themselves to the continent's accelerated development and technology progress. And this is driven by the fact that the Africa has to be managed by its own citizens, and the citizens of Africa are representing a dynamic force of which the youth are in. And this led to the development of the African Union Agenda 2063, which is meant to have an integrated, prosperous, and peaceful Africa, which is driven by its own people, again by its own citizens, and therefore it has to be represented very well in the international arena. We want to see what this Agenda 2063 is all about. The Agenda 2063 is a strategic framework for the socio-economic transformation of the continent over the first 50 years, over the next 50 years. And it also builds on, as I've said, existing past, and therefore we are going to look at how this continent can be driven forward, looking at what is meant to be a sustainable development and an initiative for the growth of the continent. Why did the African Union heads of states and government decide to choose the Agenda 2063? One, we are looking at a very changing global context. Globalization and information technology revolution have provided unprecedented opportunities for countries and regions with the right policies that are made with significant advances and leave a very huge section of our population out of poverty. Therefore, there's always an improved incomes and catalyzed economic and social transformation. In addition, most African economies now have a place and have a very sound microeconomic and market-oriented economies, which have spurred growth, trade, and investment and expansion. Secondly, we are also building on the previous experience, the good experience that has been gained in running the continental blueprints, such as the new flagship program that is NEPAD, which has now been transformed to the African Union Development Agency, AUDA, and of course, still the acronym NEPAD exists at the end, and the Pan-African Peer Review Mechanism, the APRM, that has enabled the African Union to demonstrate unprecedented commitment to implement a great agenda, generate valuable lessons, and present a very strong foundation for Agenda 2063. We also look at a very and more united and a strong Africa, an Africa that today is more united, a global power to reckon with its people, rallying behind a support around a common agenda and to speak with one voice that will demonstrate a very strong capacity and to negotiate, notwithstanding the influence of force that the world want to see Africa getting divided. We also looked at a very strong and well-functioning regional institutions. Africa has 8 regional economic communities. To mention a few, the REX that we have is CENSAC, COMESA, which is the common market for East and Central Africa. We have EAC, the East African Community. We have ECAS, the Economic Community of Central African States. ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States. We have IGAD, the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, the Southern African Development Corporation, and then UMA. And today there are many coming up. For instance, the initiative for the Great Lakes region that is also being recognized by the Commission. Again, there are new investment opportunities and development opportunities that the continent is faced with. And therefore, we need to confluence the factors that present a great opportunity for consolidation and rapid progress. These include unprecedented positive and sustained growth trajectory of the continent. There's a very great achievement in the fight against colonialism and apartheid in the continent, and also a fast rising broad African entrepreneurial and middle class that is coupled with the youth bulge, which can act as a catalyst for further growth and technological advancement. And you can see that since 2013, the continent has projected that youth stands the biggest chance in driving this continent. And that's why we have the Agenda 23. Again, we have changes in the international finance architecture of which there's a rise of other organizations, for instance, the BRICS, which is composed of Brazil, China, Russia, South Africa, and again, an improved flow of the FDI to Africa beyond commodity producing sectors. The above constitute a unique opportunity that the African continent would like to capitalize on in realizing the Agenda 2063. Ladies and gentlemen, in getting the Agenda 2063, we looked at the previous frameworks that led basically to the development of Agenda 2063, and one of which is the Lagos Plan of Action, which was the earlier on action plan that led to the establishment of the Organization of African Unity, by then called the AOU, and then the Abuja Treaty. Then we have NEPAT. Then under the Abuja Plan of Action, again, there was a development of the African Comprehensive Agriculture Development Plan, CADAP, and this CADAP also gave rise to accelerated industrial development, of which we have a very programs that are taking place in the continent, especially the PIDA program, for which infrastructure development is anchored on. Then we have the Science and Technology, which is a consolidated plan of the African Union Commission. Then the Africa Agro-Industry and Agribusiness Development Plan, the Social Policy Framework, which all feeds into the Millennium Integration Program, and as well as closing the continent, letting us into the development of the Agenda 2063, which were the previous frameworks under which the Agenda 2063 came into existence. What makes this agenda so different from the others? The Agenda 2063, when it was being developed, there was a bottom-up approach used. This is to make sure that there is consistent consultation that is done at the grassroots level. And of course, many stakeholders were consulted, including the regional economic communities, the private sector, the academia, the people of faith-based organizations, the CSOs, those in diaspora, all of them were consulted for us to be able to develop the uniqueness of this Agenda 2063. Again, result orientation. There were targeted goals, there were strategies that have been set up, and these are set up in each aspiration area for national, for regional, and as well as continental stakeholders. The target will form the basis for holding stakeholders accountable in an event that they do not perform. There is also a set of monitoring and evaluation and accountability of it. And this Agenda 2063 has a monitoring and evaluation component to ensure that planned activities, outputs, outcomes are tracked for attainment, with midterm reviews providing the basis for program alignment. Accountability roles will be assigned, and the outcome of monitoring and evaluation process shall be used to manage accountability relationships. Equally, we wanted to look at the policy coherence that makes the Agenda 2063 different from other past continental initiatives. And this is to do with the first time that all continental and regional initiatives have been brought under one umbrella. Recently, our head of states and governments do have what we call the midterm mid-year review, where they sit together in one of the countries to review how we can be able to differentiate or allocate work to the regional economic communities, to the member states, and as well as the continents. So these are what has been happening, and this has set Agenda 2063 different from past initiatives. Financing and partnership. There is a resource mobilization strategy that has been developed, and you could have heard recently that the African Union wanted to finance itself other than having external financing. And this has made Agenda 2063 quite different. Then there is a robust communication strategy, which has been known to drive communication as per the Agenda 2063, and capacity a key success factor for successful implementation of Agenda 2063 is the capacity of individuals and instructions to play their roles in the domestication of Agenda 2063. And the capacity assessment is being undertaken to address these needs. And you can also well know that the African Union Commission has been undergoing an institutional reform to make the continental body a robust body that can be able to come in and solve the problems of the continent. There are other key features that appears in Agenda 2063. One is that it seeks to harness the continent's competitive advantage that has been embodied in the people, in the history, the culture, the natural resources that we have, and including our geopolitical positions. And this has to effect equitable and people-centered growth and development. It has to look at how we can be able to eradicate poverty, how we can be able to develop our human capital, social assets, infrastructure, and public goods, as well as to establish an enduring peace and security in the continent, while putting together an effective and strong development state, which will promote a participatory and accountable institution, dreaming to empower the women and the youth to fulfill the dream of the African continent. And these are the key features that drives Agenda 2063 as far as harnessing the continental competitive advantage is concerned. Equally, Agenda 2060 wants to provide an internal coherence and coordination to continental, regional, national frameworks and plans that have been adapted by the African Union Commission, the regional economic communities, including our member states. And we want to also offer an ample policy space for individuals and collective actions so that we can be able to realize the continental vision while developing an implementation mechanism that is underpinned by a very strong management system to enhance quality and delivery of services through cutting-edge research, innovation, and codification of groundbreaking experience to promote sharing of experience and learning from each other. And here again, Landmark University could play a better role in terms of implementation of this shared vision, as well as to delineate the roles of each stakeholders, including the regional economic communities, our member states, civil society, and private sector in the formulation and implementation of this agenda. The Agenda 2063, as early on alluded by the previous speakers, has 7 aspirations, and these 7 aspirations were distilled and therefore demonstrating that the African citizenry wanted to be pursued by 2063. And these aspirations are: 1, a prosperous Africa based on an inclusive and sustainable development, an Africa that has an integrated, that acts as an integrated continent, which is politically united and is based on ideals on Pan-Africanism and the vision of Africa's renaissance. Aspiration number 3 is an Africa of good governance, democracy, respect for human rights, justice, and the rule of law. Aspiration number 4 is a peaceful and secure Africa. Aspiration number 5, an Africa with a very strong cultural identity, common heritage, shared values and ethics. Aspiration number 6, an Africa where the development is people-driven and on the potential of the African people, especially its women, the youth, and caring for children. And that's where also our agribusiness youth strategy is derived from. Again, an Africa which has a very strong and united, influential global player and player in future. And this diagram will show you how Agenda 2063 brings all this, what I've said on earlier on the aspiration, which is a prosperous Africa, a politically united Africa, a peaceful Africa, a cultural, identical Africa, a strong and an influential global partner. And always we believe that at the base of all this is the Constituted Act of the African Union, which is to stipulate the vision of the African continent and the 8 priority areas of the solemn declaration of the African continent. And this goes down to the regional economic communities and frameworks that the continent has developed, including our member states, national plans, all together are made to stand behind guiding the realization of the Agenda 2063, the Africa that we want. How are we fast-tracking the programs and initiatives of Agenda 2063? We have about 12 programs, or what we call flagship projects, for Agenda 2063. And these are the integrated high-speed train network. The idea is to have a continent that is connected by rail transport across the continent. I think this is still under implementation. It is about to take off. Then we have the African commodity strategy, which is already been developed and adopted by the policy organ of the Commission of the African Union. Then recently, the African Continental Free Trade Area, which is already operational, and it's already doing a lot of things as far as trading across the continent is concerned, where we have several negotiations that are already taking place. The one that has been concluded is the regulations on the rule of origin. Then looking at also a Pan-African e-network, where we will have the continent connected to the same network, all other African countries. They were looking at how we can enhance the free movement of persons and goods across the continent. If we start trading freely across the continent, these goods don't travel alone, they have to travel with persons. And to eliminate this, we have to issue a common African passport that will encourage the free movement of persons and goods across the continent, without trying to get visas. If you want to go to this country, you have to get visa, you have to look. We want to look at an African that you can travel. Again, looking at silencing the guns, although recently the continent has been experiencing a sudden rise in cases of coup d'etats, but then the ultimate goal is to have a continent that you will never hear guns. Then the Great Grand Inga Dam project, which is at the Democratic Republic of Congo, still feasibility study has been done. Then also the African Union Annual African Forum, that is to the African continent to evaluate themselves, what they're looking at, and also to have a single air transport network, where if you're traveling, for instance, from Nigeria to South Africa, it will be charged domestically other than being charged like an international flight. Then having one African outer space strategy. Very many African countries have gone to China, to other parts of the world, to launch their own outer space agency. However, the African outer space strategy is already developed and adapted, and there is that need to have an African outer space agency that will oversee the space agency of Africa. And I think this is in line with the flagship projects of Agenda 2063. Then the Pan-African Virtual University. This has been launched since 2019. And of course, very many universities are now participating in it. And this is an opportunity that Landmark University could also take and join the growing number of universities that are coming. Then having a continental financial institutions that will be able to serve the continent, and ultimately not replacing the African Development Bank, but any institution that Africa calls theirs. Those are the 12 flagship projects of the continent. And of course, with that, there is what we call the transformative framework, which was developed. And the Agenda 2063 document covers 3 broad areas. And these areas explains the vision of the African that we want. And this indicates that we have to have a need, and this need has to be done. And to make this need to happen, which is an implementation strategy, they are presented in 6 different chapters. That is the introduction, the vision, the overview of Africa's development dynamics, trends, challenges, opportunity, and then the goals of Agenda 2063, the priority areas, the targets, the strategies. the drivers, enablers, risks, and mitigation measures that will be taken into consideration and making this to happen as we proceed. Let's look at the 10-year implementation plan. Of course, the 10 years have already elapsed as of, will elapse next year because it's 10 years from 2013 to 2023. And it contains the following chapters: the introduction, the goals, the framework documents, the projects themselves, the result matrix, the key implementation issues as the guiding principles, then the financing of Agenda 2063, identifying the capacity gaps, the monitoring and evaluation framework, the policy framework and partnership. We have detailed guidelines, descriptions and roles and responsibilities, and how we can be able to have the implementation part of it, including other critical information that we have. In order for us to execute Agenda 2063, it has been made in different layers, and it will be fundamentally executed in 3 layers. That is from the national level to the regional and to the continental level. The national level will be responsible for the implementation of key activities under the Agenda 2063, while the rest serve as a middle ground for the implementation of the member states level, and they will be able to adapt the Agenda 2063 frameworks and to make it to their regional peculiarities and facilitate coordination, the implementation by member states, as well as develop a monitoring tool. Meanwhile, at the continental level, other AU organs, especially the African Union Commission, will be responsible for setting the broad results framework and broad monitoring and evaluation based on inputs of the regional economic communities. And to make this happen, we must identify all stakeholders and ensure that the tasks are performed by each person. Once each person provides and performs the acts, therefore there is a collective execution and attainment of the goals of Agenda 2063. It has to make sure that in order for us to finance this strategy, 75% of the revenues should be collected locally, while needing only 15% from foreign or direct investment and remittances, while 10% could come as well from international financial markets. Equally, in terms of partnership, Africa strategic partners are structured partnership. They are well articulated in a very win-win situation, whereby you negotiate as one and making sure that you negotiate and win while the other party also win. And we want to reach also out to other people, and we develop the communication and outreach, which include meetings, include debates, community town hall, churches, mosques, meetings, workshops, even songs, poems, teaching in schools, as well as this presentation we are making. All together is aimed at trying to reach to the people of the continent as far as Agenda 2063 is concerned. And there are very many critical factors that have to be considered if we have to succeed. Leadership and political commitment is very paramount. We have to also make sure that there is a participation and inclusion of the citizens in its implementation. We also need to make sure that the Agenda 2063 of the African that we want calls for changes, and again, revitalizing strategies and taking charges of all global. There are a lot of things, and for the issues of time, I'll be able to send this presentation and we can go through. There are a lot of trends and strategies that kind of poses a very big challenge to the implementation of it, but all in all, we can be able to overcome all these challenges if we diligently work together. We also linked this Agenda 23 for the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And of course, you can see these are, obviously, we have gone through them. Many of you know them, about 17 of them. But how are the two converging together? We have a high standard of living, which is for SDG goals #1, #2, #8, and #11. And as far as our agribusiness strategy is concerned, we are looking at priority area 1, which is income, jobs, and decent jobs. Again, We also look at Goal 6, which is a blue economy for accelerated growth, which to us, we are looking at marine resources. And again, we are looking at a world-class infrastructure that has to enable us. And these are things that I will share them later on. And then when we go to the African Agribusiness Youth Strategy, to which we are deriving our webinar today on, the Sustainable Development Goals of Agenda 2030 commits to leaving no one behind, and it will prioritize that an inclusion of youth is a fundamental feature that ensures sustainable development. Special Goal 8 for the promotion of full and productive employment and decent work for all, especially target 8.5, that says by 2030, we should be able to achieve full and productive employment and decent work for all women and men, including for young persons and persons with disabilities, as well as equal pay for equal value. And this is given by Goal 4, that is to give us quality education for all. And this is target 4.4 of the Agenda 2030. As well as Aspiration 1 of Agenda 2030 that calls for a prosperous Africa based on inclusive growth and sustainable development. We want to look at goal number 2 that talk of a well-educated citizen and skills revolution that is underpinned by science, technology, innovation, with priority area number 11 that talks of income, jobs, and decent work. Again, the aspiration 6 of Agenda 2063, an African whose development is people-driven, relying on the potential offered by the African people, especially women and the youth. Therefore, caring for children, and specifically we are looking at Goal 18, which is engaged and empower the youth and children. The objective of the AAYS, we are calling it AAYS, is to create an enabling environment for the youth entrepreneurship and youth employment in agribusiness sector within the African Union for 2025 and beyond. We are looking at a framework that will provide a strategy to account for all key elements as far as national and subnational levels are concerned. And then we're looking at a framework that will serve member states as a reference tool for which they can be able to use, integrate their youth activities and strategies, their investment programs, their youth employment strategies, entrepreneurship development plans, and many more to accelerate the development of the African youth. The Youth Agribusiness Strategy for Africa is an inclusive strategy. The strategy is developed with the goal to be very inclusive as much as possible, because this strategy talks about the youth. And there was a wider consultation done across the continent, and it is the voice of the youth that has been portrayed by this strategy. And it is basically what the youth want in the continent that led to the development of these strategies. And we looked at key youth segments: the women, the men, those in the urban areas, those in rural areas, minority groups, ethnicities, religious, linguists, youth living with disabilities, all of them are consulted, and the youth strategy has all those components. We also look at key situations, which is informal, either informal. We looked at conflict, we look at fragile states, we look at post-crisis situations, as well as the COVID-19 pandemic, how we could be able to make sure that the youth strategy has all those included. We also have made it that it can be implemented at all levels, at national, subnational, regionals, as well as the continental level. Key actors in implementing these strategies include the public sector, the private sector, research institutions, which Landmark University falls under, financial and technical partners that could even support in the implementation of this strategy. And this strategy is also linked to an ongoing initiatives of the continent that should be integrated into other initiatives that are going on. And the AAYS has been developed and should be implemented according to these fundamental principles that we have outlined. The main implementation level are the national levels and subnational levels. It is important that we decentralize this strategy to the subnational level. Youth of all categories, and each category, young men and women, should be included if we have to implement it properly. We also want to make sure that agribusiness related to all the segments of the value chain from production up to consumption is taken care of. And systematically, we are building on an existing and only creating new structures, programs, organizations where necessary, but we should be able to use those structures that were in existence. The overall structure of this strategy is that it includes everyone, it allows everyone to innovate, and it is also meant to preserve the earth. And that's why we put that the youth are at the center of it, where at the end of the day, it has to empower the youth to be an entrepreneurs. And the YYX reflects this focus by situating that empowerment of the youth is very, very important, and it is the fulcrum of this strategy. This is a pivotal point, which means that we have to ensure that knowledge, skills, and opportunities to participate in policy development and decision making as far as agribusiness sector is concerned should be built around individual businesses of the youth. And that's why if you look at the pillar, the fulcrum is down here to help us reinforce systems upwards. The structure of this AAYS is built under 3 key pillars. That is building system for implementation, and also meant to transform markets. It's meant to strengthen the value chain, integrating youth into national and subnational value chain. There are other 3 cross-cutting areas that it has looked at, where I've said earlier on, including everyone, key youth segment, women, youth, those with disability. And it should also be a technical, technological, organizational, and social. Meanwhile, the AAYS take into consideration environmental sustainability at all levels so that we can be able to use our resources again and again. When you empower the youth, you will make sure that the youth will have a decision-making segment, and this youth strategy has given that basis to the youth. Again, it has empowered the youth to make sure that they actively participate in value chains development. And once you empower the youth, you are able to empower them in value chain development. You're going to have young entrepreneurs that have got a voice, that have got the power, and that have got the means for an action. And this is where the fulcrum of empowering the youth in agripreneurs is concerned as far as the strategy is concerned. The strategy has pillars. One of the pillars is to reinforce system for implementation. And here we are looking at institutional leadership. We are looking at data collection. We are looking at policy development, knowledge management, of which it's a very key area for Landmark University to look at if it is developing its curriculum in terms of implementing the AAYS. This pillar 1 is a very good focus for the university. Again, how do we transform markets? You need to develop markets, and therefore we should be able to develop curricula that promotes market, that promotes a modern African market in terms of concept development, in terms of how to manage value chain, also indicating the recent digital market that has been crossing the continent and developing at a faster rate. And number 3 is strengthening the existing value chains and any other value chain. This is done by developing the youth in an inclusive value chain strategy, which will enhance their agricultural productivity, promoting value chain segments that will lead into partnering and ecosystem. When this happens, you will make sure that the youth have got access to land, they have got access to inputs, and they have access to equipments. And this can only be done when we are strengthening the value chain. That is an important step for the youth. Other cross-cutting issues, including the youth in the urban and rural areas, those with their educational backgrounds are considered in this strategy. Those in the informal economy are considered. Of course, the university could also think about tailoring short courses for those who might not have formal education, or those who are in the informal economy and who have not had formal education, to access the university and develop tailor-made courses to enable them improve their skills. And in order for us to achieve this, we need to strengthen the research institutions that support agribusiness actors. And that's why we're having the first engagement, and more engagements will come on. because research is important. And for us to research, the academia, we place it at the forefront. And of course, innovate. This is done through a value chain. We need to develop solutions that are technological advance while creating incentives for agro-businesses. Dr. Edeme said on that the universities think about rewarding faculty or staff that have innovated or have developed a very good research. And this is what this strategy is looking at, and as well as supporting and fostering networks. Collaboration is an important aspect that the strategy has looked on. Again, other cross-cutting issues include, of course, the environmental part of it. This has been talked severally, and our implementation levels are at all the levels of the continent, the region, the national level, and sub-national level. While we also have put that there is a robust monitoring and evaluation system in the strategy to make sure that all the objectives set in are achieved as by 2050 and beyond. Now, what is the role of higher education in the implementation of this strategy? African university ultimately will be responsible for replenishing the stock of human capital in their research extension services and for providing them with the broader sets of skills necessary to grow agriculture in the 21st century. That one is taken from the World Bank. Therefore, academic institutions have a central role to play towards capacity building in agribusiness. We expect that we have developed this strategy, and we expect now that university, of which Landmark University is part of the Continental University, do develop and replenish the stock of our human capital. Many of our students, many of our young people no longer look at agriculture as an area they will go to in schools to study. We should be looking at that the stock of human capital in the agriculture sector are getting worn out. So what do? The universities will think of developing curricular courses that fits into the modern agricultural system. We also need to ensure that we spur rural development and food security, agricultural education and training in Africa has traditionally been focused on agricultural productivity. We did not look at the other areas, for instance, agribusiness. So the universities will, instead of focusing now on productivity, looking at all that is involved in the agricultural value chain, from production up to consumption of agricultural products. More recently, again, development practitioners and policymakers have broadened their attention to include agribusiness or agro-industry. So we should be looking at how the higher education will also go into looking at agro-industries. Very, very important, so that we can be able to skill our young men and women. However, the role of agricultural education and training in fostering agribusiness growth in developing countries is relatively underexplored. As said by Christy, he has identified roles that development of agribusiness can be done. That's one. We need to analyze public policies and regulations. We need to design and evaluate alternative institutions that strengthen small and medium enterprise linkages. We need to offer an innovative capacity building programs, of which, for instance, if we at the African Union Commission think we need to capacitate our building, we should be able to have an institution that we can run to and get its staff, get its faculty, get its professors to come and provide that capacity building, come and incubate. As you have said, we can be able to have an incubation center where we can send African young men and women to get capacity building programs. Again, we need to develop programs that suits the current needs of the youth and equipment and equip them and train students for the tasks that may not be present today, but will be there in future, while providing for them a very practical opportunities or an industrial experiencing. While developing their soft skills, we also need to be able that it is maybe difficult or impossible to acquire classroom environment without taking the students outside. There are other problems that we understand the universities are facing, especially isolation of agricultural universities from other parts of the university system. You find that in many countries, the agricultural college or the faculty of agriculture is taken to rural areas where the other faculties are in town. So this has been a problem that has been affecting many of our universities. Again, we have lack of communication between employers of university graduates, the market, the poor, the practical skills, they're not there. We have a decreased funding, especially for agriculture and agribusiness. We have very weak connections, the high employment rates of graduates that often lack relevance, and this depends on what they have been taught. There is a failure to attract best quality students from secondary school to take agriculture or agribusiness studies at the university. And again, inbreeding, teaching and research staff are frequently graduates of the same university or college. We are saying we want to retain our best minds within our university, but we are doing inbreeding. We need to crossbreed. And our recommendation is that the university will have a paradigm shift from agriculture to agribusiness. It's to be able to learn from other developed countries and adapt for Africa. It will have gender inclusive student nature, and that the training syllabus will include gender as well as ensuring that there's a balance of quality and quantity in terms of students. Then teen agribusiness training needs to be a signal of measures of quality in evaluating outcomes, and then engage the private sector at all times, use and develop local case studies that will encourage students, and then training instructors on the use of case studies as a teaching tool while adapting to a very changing environment of which we live. Thank you so much. I've overtalked. My apologies for talking a lot. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kennedy Ayasin, for that beautiful presentation. We can say this morning that our presentation was insightful and expository. And of course, Landmark University has had the privilege this morning to listen to that firsthand. And of course, you have, the youth population where this, the implementation and the engagement will be starting off. Again, thank you very much for that presentation. Let us put our hands together once again. I know we have taken notes and we have our questions. Of course, we are going into a session of interaction where we'll be, giving our questions, and answers shall be provided. And this session will be moderated by Dr. Janet Edeme. Let's put our hands together as we receive her.
Thank you very much, Master of Ceremony. I think because this is a hybrid webinar, we may have to split the roles and the tasks. I may not be able to see those who are participating in person who would want to take the floor. And so for those individuals, I would request that the MC gives them the floor. I would be able to monitor online those who would have also raised their hands and would like to take the floor. So if that methodology is agreed upon, we could now open up the floor. If they are in person, MC, please, you can give them the mic. And then I would also identify those online who could please try to raise your hands. And then I would also give you the floor for your comments, contributions, observation, or areas of clarification. So with that, the floor is open.
All right. Do we have persons here with questions? Kindly come forward to make your presentation. Please come forward.
Thank you, MC and my Vice Chancellor, Ma. Please permit me to stand on the already established protocol. My question is based on the presentation of Mr. Kennedy. During his presentation, he rolled out the agenda of AU, the 2063 agenda. And then I begin to think, in all the agenda rolled out to create an enabling environment for growth and agripreneurship, I was now asking, what is the role of healthy soil in achieving all of this agenda? Do you think there is room to give consideration to healthy soil in order to be able to achieve this agenda efficiently and effectively? Thank you.
And then MC, I have Engineer Aniyi online. If we could also give him the floor. Engineer Aniyi, you have the floor.
Thank you, Dr. Janet Edeme. Are you hearing me?
Yes, sir. We hear you loud and clear.
Okay. I want to appreciate those presenters. You have made beautiful presentations. But I think from my end point here, there is time now for African to walk the talk. We have done a lot, and we have a lot, and so many agendas have been rolled out. And along the line, we find out that this agenda has been truncated. First and foremost, we need to be united as Africans for our agenda to stay true, especially the head of our states, head of governments of Africans. We need to unite on a common purpose for us to achieve all this agenda. Then secondly, mine is not a question per se, but a comment. Secondly, I want us to look at agripreneurship we are talking about from the point of mechanization. We need to add values to the little we are producing within our various countries in the continent. And there's a time for us, this is the time for us to empower our universities across Africa, especially landmark university, for adding value. Let's channel our resources towards this, because agripreneurship without adequate knowledge of adding value will also end the same way other agenda has ended. My take. God bless you.
Thank you very much, sir. I do not see any other hands online. So MC, in case you have people in person who would like to take the floor again, yes, you can take like 3 questions, and then I can hand over to my colleague Kennedy to respond, and I could supplement his responses if necessary.
All right, we have about 4 persons with questions.
Thank you very much. My VC, please permit me to start on existing protocols. Now, talking about Agenda 2063. This is the first time I'm hearing about this agenda. And 10 years already gone to it. It's a beautiful agenda that's rolled out. But I believe the communication strategy put in place has not been effective enough to enable a lot of people and organizations to key into this agenda. Please, I want the African Union to take a look at this, more so when 10 years out of the targeted 50 years are already gone. Now, talking about the role of higher institutions, my own observation is that it isn't that
higher institutions are not ready to play a leading role. But we discovered that the enrollment of students into agricultural courses is extremely low. How can the AU come in? I believe the AU can embark on granting aids, not only to students of agric, but to agricultural graduates. Once these aids are guaranteed, we'll see a lot of inflow of students into agricultural courses in our institutions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, the person's law. Permit me to stand on the already established protocols. My comment and question has to do with the financing of the program, the agenda. I know that in 2003, specifically in July, what they call the Maputo Declaration, where the African Union committed, and the head of state committed to ensuring that 10% of the annual budget go to agriculture. Now, this about 18 years after that declaration, talking about the Maputo Declaration, most African countries has not met with that expectations. Specifically in Nigeria, taking the past 6 years, the highest budget allocation to agriculture had been 2008 and 2009, and that is 5.41% in 2008 and 5.38% in 2009 during Yar'Adua regime. This current year, the budget allocation for agriculture in Nigeria is 1.8%, and that's about 291 billion naira. This is about 7.2% short of the Declaration of African Union. Now my question, how is the African Union enforcing the Maputo Declaration of 2003? My understanding is whatever the budget is the most legal, the most acceptable, the most logical way to finance any project. So if that is not done from the point of government, can the African Union itself finance all these programs and achieve the agenda in all the countries? That's my question. What is the enforcement mechanism by African Union to agriculture? Thank you very much.
Also standing on the already established protocol, my comment is a follow-up to what the last presenter just highlighted. A lot have been highlighted as to the strategies for the Vision 2063. But the role of governance when it comes to accountability and being responsive to even the citizens, that aspect seems to be a very serious aspect that has to be emphasized. It was mentioned earlier by the acting vice chancellor about a research experience. Even when money or funds are being released, what do we see on ground? So these are issues, internal mechanisms that guarantee that those funds are adequately used, even when mega resources are being put in place. Those things are not there. So how do we drive when there is no accountability? When resources are not properly being monitored, how will AU come up to,
drive this aspect in ensuring that we ensure accountability even in the government. Then the last one has to do with the issue of free trade zone. Looking at the level of development and our commitment now, how is it that Africa will not end up becoming dumping ground when goods are coming from other nations and they have to keep moving from one country to another? What strategy, how will AU also help, especially when the head of nations come around to meet to discuss about agribusiness transformation and how we can secure Africa in this context? So what will be the role of AU in ensuring that African eventually do not become dumping ground, such that at the end of the day, what we are expected to do will not be the reverse? Thank you.
Standing on the existing protocol, my name is Adebola Jason, Department of Agriculture and Extension and Rural Development, 300 level. My question is, the registrar, the Vice Chancellor of Landmark University came up and she said something. There was a statement that I picked. There are 14.1 million youths in Nigeria. Now, out of that 14.1 million youths, less than 30% have vested interest in agriculture. And it's not because we do not find it interesting, it's simply because most of us don't want to venture into agriculture because we don't see it as a profitable enterprise. We have the mindset that if you're going into agriculture, you're not going to make profit, you're going to end up poor. So my question is, how does the AU intend to captivate the interests of young agripreneurs? How do they want to get people from the youths to enter into agriculture? My second question is this: there are some youths among us who have innovative ideas with respect to agriculture, but the thing is that they are not empowered. Now, there are several programs, several ordinances that have been put in place to help young starting businesses to grow, but it seems like they are not being utilized. So I want to ask, can the AU please help such youths to be able to follow their dreams and also improve agriculture in Nigeria? Thank you.
All protocols duly observed. My name is Emmanuel Favor, a student of mechanical engineering, student 500 level. Based on the last question asked, it said there is no platform for innovative ideas for agricultural students and for people with innovative ideas. Based on my research, adding technology to agriculture will improve, especially delivery drones. Now, in Nigeria, based on the increase in due to bad roads and everything, the agricultural products have been expensive. For students, but for here in Landmark University, we have some students with the idea of delivery drones to deliver agricultural products interstate within the range of 1 hour to deliver, which will be very faster and efficient. Now, in the United States of America, for 2050, the GDP will increase over $1 trillion in the drone industry. Now, we'll ask for the AU if you can look into this for innovative ideas for delivery drones. Thank you.
Standing on already established protocols, my name is Adeshino Faith Adeshawa. I'm a 500 level student of agricultural economics. My question is a very short one and straight to the point. Okay, so youth empowerment starts with acquiring requisite skills through hands-on training. I would like to ask, how can we have a dedicated platform to drive hands-on training here at Landmark University?
Thank you for those questions. Dr. Janet Ademe, those are the questions we have from here. So we'll be inviting Mr. Kennedy Ayasin to provide answers to those questions.
Kennedy, are you online? Okay, maybe before Kennedy comes on, he seems to not be online at the moment. Well, I think he's still online. I'll try to respond to a number of the questions that have been raised. I think we have about 15 minutes. Kennedy, are you back?
Yes, I'm back.
Okay, so go ahead and then I will supplement your responses since you made the presentation.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Janet. I think question one, I didn't get it well. Doctor, you will come on and answer that. I didn't pick it very well. But just on the comment of engineer, I want to agree with the engineer. Yes, it is true that we have not gone into communicating the strategy, the Agenda 2063 to all our member states, to all other persons. But that's why when we get an opportunity like this, we always encourage everybody to talk about Agenda 2063 so that people will be able to know about it, and making sure that in all our presentations, in all our communications, we equally quote Agenda 2063, and all our documents contain Agenda 2063. Again, yes, for Africa to stay united, it requires a political will. That's why in Agenda 2063, there is that element of political will, as well as stability of the continent, for us to stand strong and be able to achieve the aspirations, the 7 aspirations that are inclined in Agenda 2063. Yes, I want to agree with you that it's true, we have to stay united, but of course, a human being is a human being, and with time, we shall be united. In terms of mechanization and addition of value, yes, in the year 2019, the African Union Commission launched the Bobadulo Declaration on retiring the whole to the museum. And this is a very big initiative of our commissioner, who intends to make sure that we retire the whole to the museum, and that mechanization takes a center stage if we have to produce enough to feed the continent and sell the surplus to the other parts of the world. And of course, the commission is at the very beginning of developing the mechanization part. We already have the mechanization strategy. We already have the irrigation strategy. Those are all aimed at driving the mechanization agenda of the continent. And of course, using rudimentary tools will not help us achieve a lot in terms of agricultural production. And that's why we're looking at how we could now mechanize our agricultural sector. But this requires financing. And this, the commission will, of course, not mobilizing funds for implementation, but encourage our member states to making sure that funding is mobilized to making sure that mechanization in each of our member states takes place if we have to include production. And the other one is, how can we enforce the achievement of Agenda 2063? Yes, you know, when our heads of states and government adopted a document, it is required that this document is cascaded down to the regional economic communities, who then monitors and develop similar strategies and cascade them to the member states, so that, of course, there's a reporting mechanism. And in Agenda 2063 and other programs of the Commission, there's what we call a peer review mechanism. I've earlier on talked about it. This mechanism is aimed at evaluating, especially our governments, like you evaluate each other. How have you performed in this area? What have you performed in this area where you want to improve? And this aimed at learning best practices, discarding wrong practices, and trying to work together to improve. Basically, that is how we enforce accountability. And we have not ceded our sovereignty as member states. Our countries still hold on sovereignty. So that's why the African Union does not have police. For instance, if a country A or D does that, and again, we have not yet established the African Court of Justice. So once this happens, sometimes if something goes wrong, that's how we enforce it. The question on using Africa as a dumping ground, as I've said in order to implement the Continental Free Trade Area, there are other rules that are supposed to be developed. An example of it is the rules of origin. The rules of origin entails that we have to know where these goods originated. Did they originate from Africa or not? If they don't originate from Africa, then they have to be considered that they are not within the continent. And of course, there are very many frameworks that have been developed, especially in the agriculture sector. We have the SPS strategy, that is the final sanitary standard strategy, which is aimed at making sure that our goods and commodities, especially the agricultural one, produced do follow a certain set of standards if they have to trade within the continent. How do we cultivate the interests of young people in agriculture? This has to start from earlyhood education. When there's a very good foundation, especially at the secondary school level, about agricultural education, then we are able to make sure that youth get encouraged. Again, we need to look at how we can digitalize agriculture. Of course, the Commission is developing the digital agriculture strategy. This strategy is aimed at looking on how agriculture sector in the continent can go digital. And of course, we have clustered the countries in Africa differently because of the nature of technology that they have, the penetration of internet, the number of users, the number of initiatives. So we look at the youth as a center stage, and of course, making it very decent. So we want to make agriculture a decent, attractive, and look. That's why we are looking at agriculture right now. The strategy is in terms of agribusiness. The youth should look at agriculture as a business. They shouldn't look at agriculture as only a means of producing food. So that is how we are definitely looking at it. And the Commission, of course, will be able to develop frameworks, will be able to develop documents, policies, and encourage that our member states are able to domesticate those policies, domesticate those strategies. If they have one, try to harmonize them to fit into the current system. Of course, there was also the question of enforcing the budgetary allocation under the Malabo declaration, the 10%. The question is, again, where does agriculture falls? This, the 10%, does it, because in order for us to get rich to where produce are in plenty and transport them to market, we need infrastructure. And part of that money goes to infrastructure, roads, ministry. Sometimes we need to have power, electricity to kind of add value to these commodities. Where does it go to? Which ministry? So the question of the 15% has still been a problem, but Dr. Edeme will be able to add more on it. But I think looking at our Benin review, many of our countries are not on track as far as the 10% allocation of the GDP to agriculture is concerned. And it is there in our binary review. It's a public document. You can go online and see which countries are on track, which countries have allocated, because there is it's our monitoring tool of the CADA program. In terms of innovation, especially the use of drones for delivery, we have countries already in the continent that are using drones for delivery, especially pesticides, other communities, especially Rwanda. So it's what we should look at, how we could be able to promote our youth to be very innovative. And the African Union Commission has got an innovation challenge, which every year those young men and women of the continent that have developed an innovative idea is rewarded at the end of the year, or in any of our summits, or in any fair happening across the continent. I remember in the last intra-Africa trade fair in Durban, South Africa, more than 120 youth of the African continent were given awards, and this is to motivate them to be very innovative and very entrepreneurial in terms of ideas, and to encourage more people to enter into the innovation space. The other question is a drive-on-hand experience for I think this question is for the university, what they can provide for the students in order to have a hand-on drive in terms of agribusiness. These are the few I have picked. Dr. Janet, if there's any, I would not, please, and you can be able to add more. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kennedy. I think you have been able to touch on and respond to the questions that were raised, particularly with regards to the Maputo Declaration, which was adopted in 2003 in Maputo, Mozambique. And that declaration, where our heads of state said they were going to allocate 10% of the public resources, public budgetary resources to agricultural development on the continent. Because the studies we had carried out then in 2003 had indicated that if we're able to allocate 10% of our national budget resources to agriculture, we'll be able to get a 6% growth rate. And that 6% is the baseline needed to move our people out of poverty, grinding poverty. And so we have been tracking them from 2003 for 10 years, 2013. And then we had a study that was undertaken for us to review how well our countries had done. It wasn't a very nice picture. We had a few countries that were on track. We had a few countries that had exceeded the 10%. For example, like Ethiopia, Rwanda, they had exceeded the 10%, and we could see it translated as well in their GDPs and in the livelihood of their citizens. And then also another challenge that we had was, how do we identify this 10%? Kennedy had already spoken about it. We speak to our ministries, they tell us part of the 10% went into developing a silo for storage, or for putting a rural road for an agricultural market. How do you begin to define what 10% means? Is 10% only for silos? Is it for the roads, rural infrastructure, electricity going to a farm, or putting up post-harvest storage houses? So that became a bit of a challenge. But anyway, the important thing is that before 2003, the percentage of our national budgets to agriculture was sometimes 0.1, 2%, sometimes 3 or 4%. But we noticed that after 2003, we did not get to 10%, but our countries began to make some acceleration upwards in terms of allocating additional resources for agricultural development. And when we did that study in 2013, I realized that we were expecting a significant support, or the significant resources for agricultural development, to come from the public sector. The private sector was completely missing in that conversation. And so when we did the study, we identified this as a gap. And that's why in 2014, we had the Malabo Declaration. And the Malabo Declaration is heavily focused on private sector engagement in agricultural development, looking at agriculture as a business, looking at agriculture as a means for job creation, decent jobs for our youth. So we have begun to look at it that way. And then even the heads of states also reconfirmed. They have not dropped the Maputo Declaration of the 10%. They recommitted themselves again in 2014 and said, it is still a valid decision that we need to track them on. And that is why we have the biennial review, where we track our member states. We track them every 2 years. We report on their status of implementation of the jointly agreed upon commitments. So we are not doing too bad as a continent, but at least we are not where we were when we started increasing our strategy in terms of engagement of agricultural development. My take home and what I would want to give in summary before I hand over the floor to the MC is that we're trying to look at how Landmark would be able to make use of this strategy. The VC had talked about setting up an innovation center. The strategy has already begun to identify areas of focus. We're talking about building capacity, empowering our youth in value chain development. If you're able to use this strategy, it would help to begin to address some of the challenges that we're talking about. And you can use the strategy as a working document, as a tool, when you're going to be setting up the innovation center. So I'll be having further discussions as well with the team at Landmark on how I can begin to link the university with the African Agribusiness Incubation Network. There is a network already in place. It's based in Accra in Ghana, and the team there are willing and ready to support Landmark in setting up the incubation center. So this will be some of the takeaway I will be getting from here and some of the next steps with how we're going to continue engaging with Landmark University. And I think that would also respond to the question that had been raised by, I think, the 500 level agri-economics students who talked about a dedicated platform, innovation to excel. If you're able to utilize the strategy, it's already laid out there. The strategy already identifies the areas of focus and how you can begin to empower our youth for them to have a better interest now in agricultural development and in agribusiness. When every time we think about agriculture, we are thinking about the whole, we are thinking about backbreaking, we're thinking about the sun, we're thinking about poor remunerations. But our youth are very tech savvy. And on the whole value chain, there are various intervention points where our youth could bring in digital solutions. They could come up with platforms on market information systems, for example. They don't have to go and dig. They don't have to plant. They could even come up with platforms or apps that could talk about weather forecasts, when it's going to rain, how it's going to rain, the quantity, whether the farmer should plant or should not plant. So this would also provide jobs for our youth. So our youth, please do not think about agriculture as only backbreaking with a hoe, doesn't give you a good job. Begin also to have a lot of mentors. And you will also begin to see that there are lots of youth who are making very good money in agricultural development. So with this, let me hand over now to the MC, and then we can go to the next agenda item. Thank you very much.
Doctor, the first question, I know whether you have answered.
Oh, my apologies. It had to do, I think, with the role of healthy soils. Yes, we know that soils are important. If we do not have healthy soils, that will be an impact in terms of agricultural productivity. So here at the level of the commission, we are already beginning to think about a soil summit within the context as well of fertilizers, whether organic or inorganic. So we're going to be we're setting up the conference, I think sometime towards the middle of this year, on soil summit. So once the advert is out, the conference announcement is made, I will get in touch with the relevant officers in Landmark to link you up as well for that discussions in terms of how healthy soils would also contribute to the broader agricultural productivity on our continent and the Agenda 2063 in terms of productivity as a whole. Thank you. Thank you, Kennedy, for the reminder. Over to you.
Let us put our hands together for Dr. Janet Edeme and Mr. Kennedy Ayasin. Thank you very much for the responses you have given to our questions. Again, you will agree with me that Landmark University or this program is telling us that we are on the right track. Towards achieving our vision of agrarian revolution. Again, let us put our hands together. We are bringing up the Dean College of Agricultural Science for the vote of thanks.
The VCMA, I want to appreciate the privilege given to me to make the vote of thanks. And I want to ask for your permission to stand on the established protocol.
On behalf of the VC of Landmark University, I want to say thank you all for attending this 17th Lucrid Webinar. Thank you for taking out your time out of the busy schedules we all have. I want to say thank you all. Thank you to all the online participants and the on-ground participants. We appreciate, and we all know that coming here is not a waste of time. We want to thank the presenter. We want to thank Dr. Janet too for the collaboration. And we are hopeful that this is just the beginning of the collaboration with African Union. More insightful things are ahead of us. Thank you all for coming, and God bless.
May I have the singular honor this afternoon to invite the Vice Chancellor for the closing remarks. Let's rise to our feet as we receive her.
Thank you so much. Please, may we be seated. This afternoon or today, we've been able to receive a way forward for us as the University of Agriculture, and more importantly, for our kings and queens. We believe this webinar, 17th webinar, we provide for the youth the voice they need to speak out there. We provide for the youth the power in terms of skill acquisition, and more importantly, as a university, this webinar is planned to also provide the platform that will create that enabling environment for training in agriculture. We have received what we call the first dose. This first dose will culminate into the next one. We are believing African Union and Landmark University will facilitate together. And this will come in the shortest time possible. How I wish that this next platform will be in place before the current 400 and 500 level students are done. And I know they will be done by June at most. Before then, we believe that something will be on ground for us, and especially for the graduating students now, to take home and begin to run with. And on this note, permit me to appreciate the African Union. Arising from this meeting, the strategies which are rolled out, the 3-4 key strategy areas, we put them together and then see how to bring up the African Union in the area of incubation. Thank God for the 2 students that spoke in this direction. One of them is from mechanical engineering, and the other one is from agric economics. We believe that running with an incubation center will help us to situate the place of agriculture in the heart of our students, and by implication in Nigeria and in Africa. And so on this note, I want to appreciate everyone like the Dean College of Agricultural Sciences has done. And in closing also, Dr. Edeme talked about an upcoming conference. I want to chip it in here, Dr. Edeme, that we have faculty, we have staff, we have students that we would wish to benefit from that same platform, looking at sponsorship for that conference. On this note, we want to appreciate us and believe that good thing has started, and that good thing will be accomplished by this webinar. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. We have come to the end of this webinar, the 17th in the series of Lucrid Webinar. And it is my privileged honor to welcome the Dean, College of Business and Social Sciences for the closing prayers. Let us rise to our feet as we have.
Shall we pray? In Jesus' mighty name. Father, we want to appreciate you this afternoon for the privilege granted every one of us to be in this meeting. I want to thank you for the wisdom that is released so far this afternoon. I want to pray that for the African Union, the Landmark University faculty, staff, and students, you will give us the grace to walk the talk. At the end of the day, let all our plans and strategies come to fruition, and your name alone shall be glorified. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen.
We shall be having a session of photograph outside here. So let us proceed further.